clicking the accommodation reviews at the bottom of the page, scrolling down to boundary change review, and clicking on Niagara Street and the Waterfront School. We will start our meeting today with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge we are hosted on the lands of the Mississaugas of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and the Inuit peoples. Next up, we have introductions. As I speak the members' names, please wave to the camera or to the audience to let them know that it's you. We'll start off with Trustee Alexis Dawson for Ward 9. Next up, we have Jack Nigro, Executive Superintendent for Learning Center 4. Next up, we have Superintendent Jennifer Chan for Learning Network 21, and also Superintendent for Niagara Street Junior Public School. Next up, we have Superintendent Mary Linton for Learning Network 22 and the Superintendent for the Waterfront School. We also have Delora Harvey, Principal at the Waterfront School. Next up, we have Richard Menzies, Acting Principal for the Niagara Street Junior Public School. And finally, we have Giovanna Di Girolamo, Manager at the Strategy and Planning Department. And myself, Safia Omar Saleh, Planner also at the Strategy and Planning Department. This will be tonight's agenda. Sorry about that. After hearing opening remarks from the trustee, we'll be going through the details of the boundary review and everything encompassing it. And then later on, we will be opening the floor up for feedback and questions, and then adjourning at 8 p.m. Next up, we have Trustee Alexis Dawson for opening remarks.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Nice to see all of you. Thanks to those of you joining online as well. I'll be brief. I just wanted to say thank you so much to the staff who have planned such a great event tonight. This is my first boundary review as a trustee, so it's been a learning experience for me. And I've appreciated the guidance of staff, I've appreciated the feedback from parents, and I look forward to learning more today from all of you. So thank you.
Thank you, Trustee. So before we start with the presentation, I'm just going to go over the details of how to participate at the end. So this meeting is a hybrid meeting. So we have a in-person component, and we also have attendees watching us online right now. For the in-person attendees, simply raise your hand and a microphone will be presented to you to speak your feedback or question. For those joining us through the computer or phones, you can text your question by clicking the Q&A at the bottom of the screen, then type your question in the window. For those that want to speak, you can click raise hand at the bottom of the screen, and the moderator will be notified that you would like to speak. And finally, those phoning in, you can press *9 to request to raise your hand. And when the moderator announces your turn, please press *6 to unmute yourself. And so the order of taking questions tonight will be in person, then phone calls, and then the Q&A box. And then we will do a rotation. Just a reminder, all participants of in-person and virtual public information meetings are expected to maintain meeting decorum and abide by the requirements of the Board of Code of Conduct and the Code of Online Conduct. Discrimination and harassment will not be tolerated. Please be concise, respectful, and courteous with your comments and questions. To ensure that everyone has an opportunity to speak, please make one comment or ask one question. If you have more comments or questions, please raise your hand again, either in person or online, or type your question in the Q&A box and we'll get back to you. If you choose to speak, please minimize background audio, and that pertains obviously to the folks online. And finally, questions and feedback will be taken at the end of the presentation. And without further ado, we'll get into the actual boundary change presentation. So starting off with the long-term program and accommodation strategy document, or known as the LTPS. It's one of the most important documents for the TDSB. It provides an approach to program and accommodation planning with a 10-year timeframe that allows for responsiveness and flexibility in ever-changing environments. It also identifies studies and reviews that address program priorities and accommodation issues facing our schools, which brings us to this particular review, which is currently listed in the LTPS to explore a boundary change between Niagara and the waterfront and to address accommodation pressures at Niagara. So, which brings us to why we are here. So, Niagara Street, which is somewhat of a neighboring school, is a JK to grade 6 school located at southeast corner of Adelaide Street West and Niagara Street. Niagara is a school that has been consistently experiencing accommodation pressures due to enrollment growth within the area and is currently operating at a 95% utilization rate. So enrollment is also projected looking into the future, potentially this enrollment is projected to continue to grow, resulting in further classroom shortages and pressures. Something to note is Niagara is located within a small school building. And so all classrooms in that school, although even operating at 95%, not 100, all classrooms are currently being used. The building itself is located on a small site, 0.86 acres, which makes the placement of portables not possible and very challenging. In addition to that, it makes it challenging to do any capital expansions for a school like that on a site like that. To get a visual of the school's numbers, as I mentioned, the school currently is operating at 95% utilization with 0 rooms to spare. Looking into the future, the school is projected to steadily increase to a point where it will begin to operate above 100% utilization, which results in potentially in a deficit or shortage of 2 classrooms. Now, we need to keep in mind that these numbers take into account other solutions we've already applied, and even then the school is projected to have some kind of pressure in the future. And we will talk about some of the solutions we've already applied for the school. So one of the solutions is the retrieval of a classroom space from the childcare, which was taken effect in September 2022, and the school is currently using. The next solution that has been put in place is a residential redirection. So back in May 2022, we have redirected 13 residential towers from the Niagara catchment and redirected them to Ryerson Community School, which is the set middle school for Niagara naturally. But these kids at these particular addresses would be starting at Ryerson earlier. And this redirection is temporary until a more long-term solution is found for Niagara and we're able to accommodate those kids in a more optimal classroom sizes and whatnot. And the aim is to have those kids to come back once Niagara has been stabilized. So before we get into the actual boundary change, I wanted to give a chance to provide some context about Waterfront School, a major player obviously in this review. We are currently in Waterfront School, located at the southeast corner of Queens Quay West and Bathurst Street. It's a JK to grade 8 school. It currently has a utilization rate of 79%, and it offers a regular track program only, similar to Niagara. So as I mentioned, the school is currently operating at 79%, and it experienced a slight decrease this year due to changes within the residential inventory within the catchment and changes, people making different decisions and moving out of the area. So the school has dropped in enrollment this year. But looking into the future with the new development coming into the area, eventually the school will recover and go back to enrollment numbers that it has been in the past. So this brings us to the actual boundary change proposal. So the proposal involves designating the Fort York area, which is circled here in black and outlined here in red, to designate it from Niagara Junior Public School attendance boundary to the Waterfront School attendance boundary. And this is being proposed for September 2025. A little bit more information about this boundary change is the Fort York area is south of Fort York Boulevard, north of the Lakeshore Boulevard West, and west of Bathurst Street. The Fort York area is within walking distance of the Waterfront School. Looking at the numbers within the Fort York area, on average, we have about 107 TDSB students that live within the Fort York area, and 60 of those kids choose to go to Niagara. Other kids make different decisions based on programming, such as French and special education. And of those 60 Niagara kids, there's 15 JK junior kindergarten Niagara children. So If this boundary change were to get approved, we're looking at about a cohort of 15 students being added into Waterfront's enrollment each year, with each year after implementation. So, what does our schools look like after this implementation? So for Niagara, the yellow here is indicating the year we begin the implementation of this boundary change, if approved. And we start to see a steady decrease in numbers um, for Niagara, where it gets to a point where it steadies at 70% utilization. And as we can see as well, the school has a little bit more flex space and is now going into a surplus of classrooms rather than a deficit. Now, we have to keep in mind that we do have buildings or residential developments that have been redirected to Ryerson. So what does the school look like once those kids come back? So that is, we're looking at potentially bringing those towers back into Niagara as part of Niagara's enrollment in September 2026. And so we see that the school increases slightly, but is still within manageable means and still has breathing space, and balances out at about 81% utilization in the long run, and still has some flex space in case there are some influxes found within the community. So what does Waterfront look like with this uh, boundary change implementation? So in 2025, where it starts, we see the school begins to steadily increase in numbers. And by at a certain point, the school will reach a point where it starts to operate above capacity and begin to go into a slight shortage of classrooms. In that case, we're looking at about 5 years' time when that will begin, and TDSB staff and planning will be working together to make sure accommodation solutions are explored to make sure the school is stabilized and taken care of and address these accommodation pressures which are down the line. So further details about this boundary change. So when it comes to legacy students and siblings, so students residing in the Fort York area and that are currently attending Niagara as of the end of June 2025 will have the choice to continue attending Niagara until graduation. The younger siblings of students currently attending Niagara can choose to attend Niagara with their older siblings, provided that the older sibling is present at the building at the same time the younger sibling starts. So if the older sibling ends up graduating before the younger sibling attends, the younger sibling is expected to attend the Waterfront school or their school based on address, of course. The middle school, the current middle school for Niagara is Ryerson. So for current students, they will have a choice. So for current students up until June 2025, those kids will have a choice once they graduate to either attend Ryerson with their friends or start at Waterfront School for grades 7 and 8. However, for new students that come along, they will automatically, grade 7s and 8s would be starting at the Waterfront School. The secondary school currently for Niagara is Parkdale CI, and that will continue to be the secondary school after implementation of the boundary change, if approved. In terms of the early and mid-immersion catchments or pathways, for early French immersion, the current pathway for Niagara is Lord Lansdowne, and then it goes to Harvard CI. But with this implementation, if approved, the new pathway would be Winchester and Harvard CI. The middle immersion, the current pathway is Ryerson Community School to Oakwood CI, and that pathway will not change. It will remain the same after the implementation of the boundary review. So timelines for this review. So the local feasibility team, which we have here, most here and some online, will reconvene to review and consider feedback received from this evening's meeting, emails and surveys. The local feasibility team will develop a final set of recommendations and draft a final report to the Board of Trustees for approval. The report will be presented to the Planning and Priorities Committee of the board on April 11th, 2024. The Board of Trustees will make a final decision on April 17th, 2024, and decisions will be communicated to the community following that meeting, sorry. So that concludes the presentation portion of the evening. Ways to provide feedback and have your voice heard. First of all, we have a feedback survey now live on our public website. It will be closed next Wednesday, February 14th, 2024 at 5 p.m. This survey can also be accessed via the TDSB review website, which I've also included here for anyone to note down in order to access the public website. Comments and questions can be submitted via email to accommodationreviews@tdsb.on.ca. The TDSB's Planning and Priorities Committee meeting, which I mentioned is going to be on April 11th, is an opportunity for the public to do something called public delegations, which allows the public to make verbal presentations or submit written material. To register a delegation, you must email governance and board services at delegates@tdsb.on.ca by Tuesday, April 9th. So 2 days before the actual Planning and Priorities Committee meeting by 4 p.m. on April 9th. And for more information regarding this process, please visit the tdsb.on.ca/leadership/boardroom/delegations website in order to get more details on how to present a delegation. So I think that concludes tonight's meeting. I wanted to thank everyone for coming out and taking the time. Again, we have the survey. Please, I highly recommend, please put in your feedback in there. Any questions you have, we'll make sure to reach back out. Yeah, and we also have, again, as I mentioned, we have also a general email, accommodationreviews@tdsb.on.ca, which I've also put into the survey. So you can also reach out via that email and we can directly provide you answers. All right, so that concludes tonight's meeting. Thank you all for coming out and have a great night. Thank you.